Hey there, PDX Real Estate Podcast listeners. Before we get into today's show, I've got a real quick announcement for you, and that is that my company, TTM, is still looking to buy fixers and teardowns all over the Portland metro area, even in this post-corona economy that we have going on right now. So if you have anything that comes across your desk that may not fit the retail market, we'd love to hear from you. All you got to do is go to our website, which is ttmdevelopmentcompany.com. There's a Contact Us tab. Fill out the information, submit it to us, and we'll give you a call. Or if you'd like to, just call us at the office, 503-224-6200, and we'd love to chat with you about the property. Now, let's get into the show. This is the Portland Real Estate Podcast, your number one place for anything you need to know about the Portland real estate market, along with in-depth interviews from our local real estate industry experts. Now, without further ado, here are our hosts, Tucker Merrihew from TTM Development Company and Steve Nassar from Premier Property Group.
Listeners get that. They get that, and they see that this is there's no agenda here. This is just genuine three guys talking through what they do at a high level. And Tucker, you've always brought the development component to that. That's one thing the show will miss to some extent moving forward. I mean, your knowledge base of building, developing land, and that element. So can't thank you enough. It's a sad day for me, and I know it is for Joe too. I mean, we're going to move forward with this. I joked with Joe, it's like when Steve Carell left The Office, right? Great show, by the way. And they still had a winning formula afterwards. But I mean, we're losing definitely a key component to the formula. Moving forward, here's what's going to happen. Let's talk a little bit about that. So Tucker is moving. He is not going to be on the show, at least as a regular. There's nothing to say he couldn't be a guest. Yeah. He could even be a regular guest potentially and share with us. And he is starting a new show, and we'll let him talk about that here in a little bit. But so Joe and I are going to take the reins of the podcast. I am talking to a national podcast consulting firm. I have an appointment with them via Zoom next week. And I just want to brush up on a few things and tweak a couple things with how we not only record, but how we decimate the information, get it out to the various media channels. Maybe we'll start a YouTube channel where we take the videos of these and all those live. I don't know that we don't know what we don't know, right? I mean, there's plenty of people at this point that are doing podcasts, and I want to learn what we could do better as far as that. Joe and I's commitment to our listeners is we want to do a show at least once a month. And here's the exciting part. And this is where I think there could be a really cool formula as far as future shows. We are going to have a guest on every show. And eventually, my guess is we'll have regular guests, right? We'll have our favorites, the Kirk Von Wasmuths of the world, who, every fourth month will be on as the replacement to Tucker. We'll also bring on people, and part of what we talked about was we have the two channels, the two vehicles. One is the Masters Group, one is this podcast. They complement each other, right? When Joe and I talked on the phone the other day, I kind of said, one's a boat, one's a car. One's not better than the other. They just go take you to different places in a different manner. So, but the Masters Group can complement the podcast in that you have these literally thousands of people typing, commenting, potentially watching our show live, as has happened many times in the past, giving value. And Joe and I will decide, like, hey, wouldn't Richard Mario be great to get on our next show? Or based largely on what we're seeing on the Masters. We'll invite that person. They'll be on our next show. They'll help us talk through the topics. They'll give their unique flavor to that. And as the months go by, we'll probably start to accumulate an arsenal of favorite regular guests. Tucker might rejoin us once in a while. John Lamont has, who was the the mayor. He ran for mayor. He was city council of Lake Oswego. He ran for mayor. He's potentially talking about running for county commissioner in the near future of Clackamas County. He's very politically involved. I think he has a good pulse. He's a pretty good storyteller too, by the way. He's a pretty good pulse on regional politics. And I think he'd be a good guy to bring on periodically every few months, just like, hey, what's going on in downtown Portland with the mayor? What's going on, in Lake Oswego? What's going on at the governor? We're going to have a big governor's race, right? Which is going to dictate a lot of what happens here in Oregon. So we're going to keep bringing valuable content. We're going to change it up a little bit. I would be surprised if we don't see Tucker from time to time join us and maybe tell us a little bit about his journey. Tell us about what now that he's in a new market, what's that like? What's better? What's worse? What's different? He's also going to be simultaneously doing a podcast. Tell us about that, Tucker.
So I've been doing this type of show, right? Where we have Discord and we have guests and we have interviews, which is a great show. I love doing this type of show, especially with you guys, because it's a flavorful recipe, right? We get a bunch of different personalities. It's not like it's scripted. We just kind of go back and forth and we ask questions. And of course, you guys rabbit hole wherever, you see fit, which is cool. That's the way it should be. The next show that I'm doing, it's completely different than anything I've done before in terms of how we produce it. And it's going to be much more challenging at the same time, but it's basically going to be an audio reality show. So I've been doing a lot of recording of kind of my daily life, let's say, as I'm making this transition from, basically divesting millions of dollars here, getting my GC license in Florida, making this adventure across the country, buying a house there, setting up a business there, getting licensed there, starting operations, starting projects, all of those things. And so I'm doing that in a way that will allow people to kind of, sit in the front seat with me and kind of get a glimpse into what that's like. And so it should be really cool. There's been a couple other shows out there in the world of podcasting that have done it. And the ones that have done it really well have gone on to be huge hits. And so that's our hope. And I've got some help. Obviously, Dan's helping me, and I've got kind of another helper as well that's a party to another very large show out there. So we've got a good recipe. We've got a good team. And I'm excited to try something just different, since I know what the recipe is for these types of shows and how to make them successful. So I'm going to challenge myself to kind of step outside of that and try something new. And I think that it'll be a great experience, if nothing else. And, to be totally honest, I'm trying to bring exposure to my business on a larger scale, because as you mentioned, Steve, I'm going from the minors to the majors. And when you go from the minors to the majors, you need more money. And so I need more money partners eventually as I get to Naples and I start doing more projects. And so the more visibility I can get for the business, I've documented my journey for years now. So, everybody knows that what we do is what we do. I'm not a scammer. Everything is legit. We put out an amazing product. And so, the more I can get that out there and people can kind of follow that trail and say, hey, I'm interested in what he's doing. I like what the projects they got going on. I've got some money to deploy. Let's talk. Right. And so that's the ultimate goal with the show. In addition to just kind of, allowing people to stay connected with what I'm doing.
Very cool. And so
basically it's $1 million listing, but like a year before. That's what it is. It's the building of the $10 home. And
Hey,
I mean, you see a lot of like, fix it. Uh-oh, I'm unstable. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're
Well, you are unstable. We know that, but
and my internet is kind of wonky. Yeah, there's all those real estate shows, any part of it, which it's fix it or flip it, love it or list it, beachfront, whatever, properties, they get a little fixer and they put spray paint on a turd and then they sell it. And then their profit is all calculated, $300,000 for this little tiny house and wherever. I don't know that there's a lot of like from the ground up, like what you have to go through. I mean, in Lake Oswego, it's a colossal mess of permits and all the things you have to do and fighting to cut a tree down or whatever, not to trigger you. I mean, there's
I got PTSD already. Yeah, just saying that, but
there's going to be a great audience, and I don't think that has been duplicated very many times from that aspect.
no, it definitely hasn't. And we've had a lot of conversations with like production companies over the years that they do these shows, right? But the truth is those shows, they just don't overlay onto what I do well, or me as a personality well. And so I've just concluded that the best version of this show is one that we produce the way I want to do it. And with the world of podcasting, you have that ability. And if it's a hit, you can prove the concept, right? You don't need somebody else to say that's a winning formula. We'll back that, right? So we're doing it, and I've got a lot of confidence in it. I'm excited to take it on, and it's another thing to kind of layer on top of this whole adventure. But as I think I told you, Steve, if I'm going to do this thing called like uprooting my whole life and moving as far as I possibly can across the country, as we determined at lunch the other day.
In the continental United States,
Yeah.
anyway, yeah.
I want to document it, and that way, at the point that looking back in the future, I can kind of revisit the experience, and people can see what it's like, and just kind of get a feel for it. Whether you're interested in moving or not, it definitely is intriguing to people, and so I think we can harness that, and we can make it really entertaining at the same time. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be fun.
So I have a quick question about that, Tucker. So will the audio be live? Like if you got say you send out a mailer or something, and somebody calls you and they have questions about, would you be recording that call? Would you then go there with a audio piece of equipment of some sort? What, I don't know if that's a phone or what, and record the conversation and then later create the show from that? Or would you at the end of the day be doing a diary of, hey, my day was like this, I went here, I met with this person?
It'd be a combination. We'd be taking like live snippets of life with conversations I'm having. Like, let's say with somebody that owns property, right? There's an oceanfront lot I'm trying to buy right now. I've got multiple conversations with that individual. I think we're going to buy it, but I'll take snippets of those conversations, put them into the show, and then I'll video diary over the top of that. So you get to kind of see the progression through like the real life of me doing it. And then you get my kind of feedback on life, business, the whole process on top of it. So there's a really cool show that did it back in the day called Startup. And it was basically about a guy starting a podcast media company, very different personality, but the recipe is very similar in terms of what they did. And he ended up starting a media company that sold for $1 gazillion based on the fact that he created a show around it. So that's kind of the recipe that we're following to some extent. People don't do it because it's a difficult show to produce. But if you can do it well, I think it'll be a big success.
Interesting. And have you started it, Tucker?
I have. Yeah, we've been working on it behind the scenes for about 4 months now. So
what's the name of it?
I'm sorry?
What's the name?
It's called The Journey.
Oh,
yes.
Bill it. And
Bill and Ted's
you haven't released it though, right?
No, we'll be putting it out probably end of January is kind of our target launch date at this point. So we've got to get a few episodes in the can. It's a little more time intensive than this version, right? Where we just sit around and we talk about real estate and whatever's, irritating us or making us happy on any given week. There's a lot more just production, thought, scripting that has to go on. So we've got to have at least a few episodes kind of ready to go and all the audio done before we release one, so that way we don't have 3 months between episodes.
Got it. Cool.
So
well,
but
there
moving
you have
forward,
it.
we had lunch. I had lunch with you guys, and my ultimate goal when I started this show, kind of before I passed the baton here, was I wanted it to be a great way to connect with everybody else in the real estate business that we've grown to know over the years, because we've all been in it for a long time now. But it's also become a show that people go to that are moving to Portland, right? And they want to find out about Portland real estate, or people that are just interested in real estate, around the Portland metro area. And so, the goal was always just to give us as much, put us out there as much as possible and be a resource as much as possible. And so, I have no doubt, even with me stepping away, you guys will be able to kind of continue that and do more of it. Hopefully we can refine, how our tech stuff, which, like I said, we're all real estate guys, but refine, the production schedule of when, what episodes go out when, maybe it's a certain day every month. And then of course you've got your new guests and rotating guests that may be a fixture as well. So I'll be watching from afar. I'll probably be joining you guys from time to time, but as I said at lunch, I'm hopeful that you guys can kind of take this, run with it, and make it even better than it was before.
And we appreciate that, Tucker, and we appreciate all you've done for it. And I know our listeners do as well over the years to get to this point. And I told you this at lunch too. If you ever come back, you're on. Or if you want to join from afar, you're on. Anytime you want to be a guest, you're on. We might, hit you up once in a while and go, hey, what are you up to? Let's do a show. Let's talk. Because it would be interesting. It would be great to understand the nuances of it's because you've only built homes here, right? So you only know this. So it'll be really interesting to pick your brain for better or worse. There may be things I'd be surprised if there aren't things that you later go, wow, Oregon had this right. This was one thing they did pretty well.
It's really hard to comprehend that you have this wildly successful business here and then just to say, okay, well, I'm going to recreate myself over here. There's lots of positives, right? You got bigger price points, you got better weather. There's a lot of positives, but there's got to be a little anxiety in leaving what you got to go there. And it takes some cojones to do that. But,
there's a lot of people that have told me I'm nuts, for sure.
I might be one of those.
Yeah.
I don't know if I use the word nuts, but I was like, man, you're established. You're starting over because you have your knowledge base. There's no doubt about it. Your knowledge base, your understanding of the business, you and your wife is very talented in amenity selection. I recently saw your Knott's Roadhouse. I was really impressed by the feel of it. But you also have an established vendor list here. You have relationships. You have people that jump when you ask them to jump. You have network. You have land. You have a land bank. You have a pipeline of land coming up that you have to replicate somewhere new where virtually zero. So that's the part that Joe's talking about. No different than me or Joe, right? Me and Joe have lots of knowledge and we have lots of talent, but man, going to another market, there's an element of starting over that you can't refute. And it does take cojones.
Early on, that gave me a lot of anxiety early on in this process, but you get to a point of where you're past the point of no return and you just kind of have to phase it out a little bit. But I do agree with you. It's why the hell would I step away from something I've basically mastered over the last 20 years here, right? In terms of acquisition, neighborhoods, build cycle, sell, just all the nuances that go into it and who to use for what. But it can all be recreated just with time. And so, it took a long time for me to get to this position here. Hopefully I can do it in a much, quicker fashion there, having done it once already. So, it's a challenge for sure. Am I crazy? I don't know, maybe. But we'll see. I'm gonna take a little perspective in a year from now, and I'll have a better answer for you at that point. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
right.
There's that. So big changes here. But we're gonna be here for you, for our listeners, and rest assured, we'll bring you some really good stuff moving forward, and we promise to be more consistent with it, and we're going to give you as our listeners more opportunities to join us in that process and in that journey. What else we're going to talk about? We're going to talk about Zillow. Did I see that on the agenda? We haven't talked since that whole debacle.
Yeah.
And boy,
I think we need to bookend that for sure, because we had some predictions. Well, you had some very strong predictions on the show. During the course of the last year or two. So why don't you run with that, Steve? Because I know you've got a lot to say on that topic, and it's kind of an I told you so moment.
It absolutely is. And what the surprise to me wasn't that it didn't work. The idea of iBuyer or automation of the selling and buying process. The surprise to me was how quickly they it unraveled. I for one thought there was several more years, maybe a couple more years, especially since we're still in a good market, right? A good market cures a lot of ills when it comes to bad decisions with buying real estate. Heck, there was a quarter there where they were buying homes and probably overpaying, but still on the back end it was okay because the housing prices were going up 6, 7, 8, 10%. It just in a short amount of time. So I've been a vocal critic of iBuying. I personally have not been, my words were, look, this is not going to stick, but it's going to be painful for the short term because there's investors funding this, and they believe that they're, much like in the startup world, especially the technology startup world, there's a belief that you're going to lose money for years and years before you start to turn profits. And so that's where it was kind of hard to see the trees from the forest. Those investors were like, hey, just lose our money. And I'm sure someday you'll become profitable. Where I was a critic I was like, no, you're not. You're not going to become profitable. You're just going to lose that money and then realize that it didn't work. And a lot of that just has to do with, the real estate transaction, how unique every property is. Barring a condo complex where, every floor plan is exactly the same and maybe a little different floor, detached housing is so different. Two houses next door to each other can have completely different floor plans, backyards, amenities, views, on and on and on. And the idea that some technology or robot or algorithm is going to identify that, even if today they knew what the house is, 10 years from now when that new owner goes to sell it, they don't know what it is, right? And so yes, Zillow has completely thrown the towel in a grand, spectacular fashion, a complete just a complete humiliation. There was no love loss on all the journals, whether it's CNBC, the Wall Street Journal, all the media just lambasted Zillow on the idea that they went all in. And trust me, I've partnered with Zillow for 8, 9 years now. They were all in. They had taken all their chips and moved them into this iBuyer program. When they said we are laying off 2,000 people, that's probably, I don't know the exact number, but that's a huge chunk of their employees. That tells you they were all in on that program, right? They had completely ramped up all their priorities and their staff to go into this program, and to some extent neglected core businesses that they were running. Their search wasn't getting better. They weren't as focused on the agents that they were providing leads to. They were really going, all in on this program. I think most of our listeners know now at this point that Zillow said, yep, that didn't work. That doesn't happen.
There's their stock, by the way. That's what happened.
Yeah. Most and most people now know the story of what's happened to Zillow. They're eating crow. They're coming back. They're focusing on their core business. I think there is a general consensus in and this is a huge positive. I cannot understate how good this is for us average Joe realtors, if that's what you want to call us, right? Our entire industry, our entire association, the National Association of Realtors. There had been a war waged on us by automation, and there was a lot of people in our industry that, unlike me, were very concerned. They were nervous, they were scared, they were uneasy, thinking that our industry was in trouble. And there has been a complete turnaround now where Zillow and many other outside of our industry are saying, you know, there's a reason why you hire a realtor and a live person to help you through this process. It's infrequent. The average person only buys a house every 7-8 years. Why do you need to automate something if that's that infrequent? It's very expensive, right? We're not selling widgets here. We're not, mass producing mouses or whatever you want to call them. Are they mice or mouses? I always forget.
They're mouses, yeah.
And they're complicated. Real estate is so complicated. An industry that I think you can compare us to is maybe like a defense attorney. Can you imagine if, some technology company says, look, if you get a DUI or you get an assault charge or you get, in trouble with the IRS, we've got a program where you can plug in your information and we're going to provide you with an automated defense and you're going to save money. Can you imagine that? Absolutely not. Well, I think the world is realizing that real estate is much more similar in how it works to something like that, where every transaction, every house, every scenario, every buyer, every seller, there's so many nuances and it's so unique that you need a human being to be your guide through that. And that's exciting. That's comforting. Now, the thing that I want to touch on is the next leg of this. There are other companies that are still doing iBuying, and they are swearing up and down, no, that was only Zillow. We know what we're doing. And by the way, with Zillow gone, we have more market share. Open Door
is one of them.
Open Door is the main one. Yeah, OfferPad. Here's what I would say about that. I mean, realistically, what else can they say? Do you think Open Door is going to go, yeah, we're screwed? Let's put out a memo, we're screwed. They have no other business. They have no core business outside of buying and selling houses. So even if the people in the C-suite at those companies know their ship is going down, they're going to ride it down as far as they can till the very end. Okay. By the way, when the Zillow debacle happened, their stock was at $20. I made a post on Master saying effectively what I'm saying here. Somebody, there was a lot of agreement, but there was a couple naysayers who said, well, look, their stock's at $21. Well, it's at 14 today. And
you're talking about Open Door.
I'm talking about Open Door. Yeah.
And then the Zillow stock was even worse. Like they dropped like a friggin' rock. They were at 125 in July. They went down to as low as like 52. Like
a massive drop.
That's brutal.
Yeah. So I predict, and I'll say this here and now today, Open Door won't be around 18 months from now. Is probably a safe. It could be as soon as a year. It could be sooner, but they won't be around. And a lot of that Zillow, is Zillow is going to be a part of that reason, because Zillow made people nervous, made investors nervous. What does Zillow know that we don't know? Had it not been for the Zillow exit so quickly, I think maybe Open Door could have kept taking investor money, kept losing money. And investors would have said, no, you're going to be the next Amazon. I'm sure you just need to lose my money for 10 years before you figure it out. But because of the Zillow situation, I think an Open Door is going to have a lot more scrutiny on what are they buying, what's it selling for. We all know that they're buying high and selling low, and I think the pressure is going to be on them, and investors are going to start getting real tight-fisted with their money, and which is going to create a downward spiral for them. And I just don't see them having anything else to fall back on. So it'll be an interesting thing to watch. It's a huge, I can't understate this. Again, this is a great thing for our industry. This is a huge validation to us and what we do. And because that truly was, the biggest quote unquote threat to our livelihoods was this idea that there was transactions occurring with none of us involved, from any real estate company.
I think I think there's enough media out there and enough posts that, when you say, hey, we predicted this, you can go back in time and see that we basically predicted this. The Zillow algorithm, like everyone knows it wasn't correct. Unless it's a seller and it's artificially high, then Zillow's correct. But that same seller, if it's artificially low, they're like, those are never right. Well, I guess Zillow believed their algorithm too, because they were buying homes. And anytime someone says, we're not in it for a profit, we're here to change the way real estate's done, is sort of the first red flag. And the other thing is, you can't replace the human being in all jobs, because you're going to have an explosion sooner or later. I can't think of an analogy, but you're at a cookie factory and you say, look, we're going to fire all these people on the line that cut the tube of dough into individual cookies. You leave on Friday and come back Monday, and there's like 2,000 pounds of dough and tubes on the floor because the cutter broke, and their cutter broke. And they lost $550 million of their investors. But the thing that stood out probably the most is they had this enormous convenience fee. It's like, oh yeah, we just buy your house and you pay this amount, and there's no inspections, and you don't live in a fishbowl where people come in all the time. We just buy your house. Well, arguably, real estate commissions are competitive to it, in some cases less than what their convenience fee is. And it really isn't that difficult of a process. Like, my clients and customers, we have a great time together, and I educate them, and we do some hand holding for those who need it, and those who are, sharp and they don't need it. You just cut to the chase. But doing it through an algorithm where you don't have a human being, professional boots on the ground, it makes it difficult. So I think we all kind of predicted this would happen. I'm just a little shocked that it happened like a year early for me. I was expecting like next year. I didn't think it would happen so fast, but the layoffs came, and then we're closing down the iBuyer. I knew it was going, and then all the models that are similar to that are facing the same exact thing. I mean, for the more or less the same fee, what's this big convenience thing that the seller or client saving? There isn't one. And so I knew that they would go back to their old ways, which is selling leads again with their mousetrap. And look, I'm not trying to shove anybody out of the market. If you're worth what you charge and you do a great job and you serve a niche, then there's room for everybody. But I think they were trying to change the world overnight and throw lots of money at it. And it just didn't happen. So back when we were predicting this, we should have shorted Zillow.
We should have. Trust me, we should have.
I mean, I thought it had another year runway, Joe. I'm with you, because they were like, oh, our algorithms didn't properly account for, value increases. It's like, values have been increasing like as crazy as they've ever been. Like, if you can't make this work now, like, how do you make this work? Right. That's kind of the way. So it was doomed from the beginning if they couldn't make it work over the last 18 months. It's kind of the way I look at it. So, but
yeah,
we knew it was going to happen. It was just when the ship exploded, right?
And to their credit, by getting out when they did earlier than we thought, they very well may have saved the company. Because they could weather a $550 million loss, but they couldn't weather a $5 billion loss. So had they kept expanding and owning more, heaven forbid there's any kind of a blip in the housing market, they would have. What's that?
I'm just trying to change my camera. The camera's been great until now. Now it's all
gotcha. Had there been any kind of blip in the housing market, there could have been a scenario where suddenly it's billions and billions of dollars, and they just didn't have that. They didn't have that kind of bandwidth. I think when the CEO spoke on CNBC the day that he said we're laying off people and changing, he said they had like $3 billion in the bank. So he said what he was saying is like, look, we're not going under. We've got $3 billion in the bank. We're going to weather this. But I think that was what was in the back of their minds is like, one quarter, 550 million. That's 2 billion in a year if this continues. So there were scenarios where that would have been the case.
I think it forever changes the world that you guys live in, though, because we were butting up on a point where people were like, why list with a realtor when I can basically just sell to Zillow and net more money, right? And they were paying people more money in a lot of cases than you could sell houses for. So they were on the path to making a lot of realtors obsolete. And then all of a sudden they're like, just kidding, that doesn't work. We can't pay you that much for your houses, really. But it was going in a very weird direction. And we had a number of conversations about that. So, I mean, this shit got righted, but it was,
Absolutely. We talked about it. I think one of my scenarios, I sold a house in Tualatin, and it blew my mind how high a price point they were doing this on. I sold a house in Tualatin. We listed it at 800,000. Beautiful newer home, nice neighborhood. Listed at 800,000. It did back to a busy-ish road, right? And we ended up having to drop the price to 775, and I think we went into escrow at 765 or something. And we eventually closed that. Neighbor knocks on my seller's door and they're friends, and she says, who lives on the same street, same style house, same size, same busy road, goes, Zillow just bought mine for 830. And my client, rightfully so, nice person, but she goes, I wish I'd called Zillow. And how could you blame her, right? That was the world we were facing. Now, again, even when in real time when that was happening, I was like, this isn't sustainable. I'm not worried that 5 years from now this is our problem, but it is a problem today. That problem is now gone, right? And I guarantee you, even today, Open Door is being more discerning, even though they're still existing. They're still.
Oh, I tested it. They are, because I put a property in to get an offer from them prior to this whole debacle as just kind of a point of reference. And then I went in and I said, hey, give me a new offer. They dialed it back a fair bit. So they are, to say that it's not affecting them would not be true, because it's obviously causing them to reassess their own internal business model a little bit, because they're tightening up their algorithm because of what's happened. So
and there was an arms race between those companies, right? Each trying to bid each other up. The end game was, we want the most properties. He who gets the most transactions wins, right? There was no thoughts of profits. It's like, how many deals can we do? Because again, their thought was, the more deals we do, the more experience we get, the better we can perfect the process, and the quicker we get to profitability. Well, they're not thinking that anymore. Open Door now is very in tune to what they're doing, what they're paying, and so it's a very good thing that has happened. I think it happened in late October. My daughter was born October 26th, and we would just got home from the hospital. It was maybe November 2nd or 3rd. So it's fairly fresh. We haven't done a show since then, but it's a huge victory for our industry. A huge victory. I mean, there's a box you can check right now that validates every one of our jobs, right? We will always have competition from others in our industry, but that is a great competition, right? That is job security. It's when there's an external threat, right or wrong, that suddenly says we all could lose our jobs. And trust me, that has happened to other industries. I wasn't concerned it was going to hit ours long term, but short term it was hurting us. And I think, and there were people in our industry, mark my words, there was, I would say, a healthy chunk of our industry, at least a third, maybe even a half, who were concerned that the future was automation and the Open Doors and the Zillows were going to wipe us out. And they would point to Amazon and all these other companies and Expedia and say, why? Well, they did it there. Of course they can do it here. And this is, while before we were opining that it wasn't going to happen, we can now definitively say it's not going to happen because of this. So, hey, moving on from that, I mean, it is the last show of the year. year in summary, I mean, did you guys, Joe, did you have your best year yet? I know in 2020 you had your best year yet. I personally did.
It was a great year, probably not my best year from the real estate side. I did more of the company side. Still fabulous year, and we accomplished a lot in both realms. So it's been no complaints from me. And everybody asks, what do you think it's going to be moving forward? And I think we're going to start to see those changes next year of inflation sneaking in and it not being so crazy. I think we have a artificial super low inventory, super high demand. And I think that will keep up for a little while until people are like, I'm not doing that anymore. And then I think we'll get a little more leveled out. But yeah, great year though.
Yeah. And I think a lot of our listeners probably had their best years ever. I did. 2020 was my best year ever, and we're 30-40% above that. One thing that is interesting, I bet you both will agree with me on this. This Christmas seasonality really came into play. Last year there was no seasonal change for Christmas. It was phone call, offer, and all the way through up until December 24th. Maybe there was a day with none of that, and then it started again December 26th. This year, there for most of the last 18 months, up until basically a month or two after COVID started, when things really started to get crazy in real estate, I would go to the office, or whether I was home office or in our physical office, and usually at the end of the day, I still had 20 things to do, but I was like, I'm just going home, right? It's only been in the last month or two where suddenly you actually are getting through your to-do list. Like you've called everybody that you needed to call, and you're starting to realize, hey, like this is a slower time of year. There's not as much going on. And it's not to say that we're slow. It's not to say, but it's just more normal, right? It's what you expect going into the holiday slowdown. And it'll be interesting. I would think that we'll pick up after the first of the year and start to get busy as we go into the spring. But there's definitely that return to normalcy in that regard. So it makes me think there'll probably be a return to normalcy in other regards with our market. I know you've got a whole different perspective, Tucker, because you're kind of winding things down in general anyway.
I think NAR put out a report that they expected like 5 to 7% appreciation or something like that for 2022. It's really just a game of interest rates and inventory, I think, at this point. And so which one's going to go up first, right? And what kind of a effect is that going to have on the overall market? And I don't know. I think that they'll both go up slowly. So I think it'll probably be just kind of a slower burn or a slower decline in demand, and until we hit that ceiling of what people will pay to live here, right? I think that's what it comes down to. And I think we're pretty close to it, I would imagine, but we've been wrong before, so who knows?
Yeah, and what's going to be interesting to watch is the relationship between.
They've scheduled.
Keep going.
Go ahead. There was a delay, I think.
Yeah. What'll be interesting to see is the relationship between inflation and the housing market, right? Inflation inherently makes asset prices go up, but we also know that the housing market has been stretched up. So while at a glance, we all feel like, hey, this is a hot housing market, how it can't keep going up. Inflation, barring high mortgage rates, can continue to take things up. So when you say,
True.
Things could go up 6 to 10% or whatever NAR is saying, I kind of see that, like, right? We're seeing prices of everything go up. So it's hard to imagine that houses wouldn't follow suit. with the wild card being mortgage rates. And that's the craziest part of this market to me. Normally, it's always been believed and stated that mortgage rates were the arch enemy of inflation. Like when inflation goes up, mortgage rates go up. And for a variety of reasons, I think the Fed's involvement with things that just hasn't happened, which blows my mind. Like literally we're seeing inflation running around 5-6% year over year, right? Yet they're loaning money at 3% for 30 years. Like that just doesn't make any sense. Like that dollar they're loaning you now is going to be worth 93 cents next year, right? But they're only asking you for $1.03 back. It just,
you know what? It's anybody's guess. I feel like we're in a game of musical chairs to some extent. And I don't know at what point in the song we are. I don't know if we're at the beginning of the new song. I don't know if we're in the last, verse of the chorus. I don't know. And I've been doing this a long time, and I know you guys have as well. But, if inflation keeps going up, the hard assets generally keep pace to some extent. But we have these two X factors out there called interest rates and inventory. And then you've got, buyer psyche as well, or consumer confidence, let's call it. And so you mix that all up, and I don't know, I wish I had a crystal ball. If I did, I'd let you guys know what it said. So,
yeah. Yep. Well, anything else noteworthy from 2021, guys?
I think it was a great year. I think, I think everybody's looking forward to being back to normal fully. Somebody said on the news, it's like, we're going into the third year of the pandemic, which seems friggin' crazy and a little bit depressing at the same time. So I think getting back to normal on many levels, I think everybody's looking forward to that. I don't think there's anybody that's against that. And if you are, you got to get out more, because I think we all want to get back to normal. So,
yeah, for sure. Cool. Well,
Yeah.
I think we can bookend this show.
Well, I want to wish you guys and all the listeners and masters Portland Real Estate Podcast great holiday season, whether it's Christmas or whatever you celebrate, and New Year's. And it's been fun to do. It's been fun to bring knowledge to everyone. And, Tucker, it's bittersweet because you started this thing, and you're moving on to start a new book somewhere else. So thank you for starting this, and we'll be good stewards of the podcast and make it grow even more.
Well, even though Joe's breaking up, I appreciate the heartfelt thanks, whatnot. It's been a fun show to do. Like I said, I still remember sitting down with Steve the first time and saying, we got to do this show. And he, without any hesitation, said yes. So I thank him for that. And Joe, the same thing happened when we sat down and had lunch with you, and we said, hey, we want you to do the show with us. And there really wasn't any hesitation from you as well. So it's been a fun run. This has always been a bright spot in my week to sit down with you guys and do this show. And, I'll be back, but I look forward to seeing where you guys take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
See you guys.
Enjoy the rest of the year. Happy New Year.
Bye, guys.
Thanks again for listening to our show, and make sure to tune in next week for another great episode of the Portland Real Estate Podcast.